There are three ways for the Utah Jazz to get better defensively, and frankly, they all come down to one guy, Walker Kessler. Plus, Thurl Bailey stops by for day 2 of his preseason interview. It's next on Locked on Jazz. Bump, 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 bump.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
How are you? I am David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz. It's your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Today, Will Hardy gave us 3 ways that he thinks the Utah Jazz will improve defensively. They'll be tested tonight if Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving plays here in Dallas. We'll look at those, how the Jazz did in those regards last year and how they must improve this year. And then the great Thurl Bailey stops by to join the show as well. As I mentioned, I am David Locke. This is Locked on Jazz. If you're new to it, it's a daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. We give you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully we make it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen. Please hit the subscribe or follow button. It is free to everyone. If you're on YouTube, hit the bell button as well. You'll be notified whenever. We're close to 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, so it would be fun if more people on YouTube wanted to subscribe. And all the audio people have been out there forever. I love you. Thank you very much. And to the everydayers, you're what drives this thing. Thank you very much. I have exciting news. We are launching a Locked on Jazz newsletter. Yep. We'll have the ultimate NBA newsletter for you. The goal is it's your one-stop free newsletter. And it will give you a piece on the Utah Jazz every day. And then we have two national writers that will write every day for it. Plus, we'll give you all the links to all the best stories in and outside of Locked On. And then a fantasy basketball tidbit. So that'll be coming up. I always tell you guys things first. All right, let's get to it. Will Hardy said there were 3 things that the Jazz had to do to get better defensively. 1 was point of attack defense. 2 was protect the rim. And 3 was rebounding. I'm going to focus on the first 2 today. We'll get to the third one, I think, here in due time. So in regards to the first 2, let me start with the rim because that's easy. So the best defensive teams in the half court last year were all teams that had someone you were protecting at the rim, right? So Minnesota was by far the best team in the half court. Rudy Gobert had that amazing year. Oklahoma City was second. Interestingly, the Orlando Magic were third. I wouldn't say that I think they have a true rim defender. Cleveland with Jared Allen was 4th, and Philadelphia was 5th. So for all the talk of like the drop coverage and switching and all these things, it gets right down to it in the half court, playing drop, protecting the rim, having a big that alters things is the best script for how you have a good half court defense. Minnesota, Oklahoma City, Cleveland, Philadelphia, 4 of the top 5 last year all had that guy. And so the Jazz are going to build their defense this year around Walker Kessler and see whether or not Walker can do that. And there are some indications that he might be able to do that. If you look last year, when Walker's on the floor, we're 3.8 points per 100 possessions better when Walker's on the floor than off. Effective field goal percentage of the opponents was down 2 percentage points when Walker was on and off. And here are the big ones. We allowed 1.3% fewer shots at the rim when Walker was on the floor. We'd like that number to be much better. And when Walker was defending the rim, teams shot 8 percentage points worse when Walker was in the game than when he was out of the game. So when teams actually got to the rim, they shot 8 percentage points worse when Walker was on the floor than when he was off. That's in the 98th percentile of difference. So protecting the rim, we're talking Walker Kessler. And that's going to have to be his impact. And this is the massive test. And as much as we're going to talk about offense and all the other things, if Walker Kessler is going to have a good year, it's going to be because his presence denies the rim and impacts defensively at the rim. The other night, the Rockets, I think at one point, were 10 for 10 at the rim. So that's the key to that one. Point of attack gets a lot more interesting and a lot more detailed. So last year, we ranked 20th in the league against drives. We ranked 30th in the league in pick and roll defense. We'll talk about pick and roll defense in another day coming up here. Let's zero in on drives for a second. So our guys, Collin Sexton was our best drive defender, followed by Jordan Clarkson. So some of this had to do with just the amount of youth we were playing. Keyonte, for example, ranked 85th out of 100 on defending drives at 1.04 points per drive. Lauri Markkanen's not great at it. He's at 1.11, far worse than Keyonte. Collin was at 0.966. Jordan Clarkson's at 1.18. That's a pretty ugly number. Taylor Hendricks was 1.02, and Walker's not bad at 0.94. Bryce Sensabaugh was the worst of the group at 1.2. So this will be an area for Bryce as he improves his time, has improved his body, where he gets to find that out. Lauri ranked of qualifications, just to understand it, 1.11. Where did Lauri rank on drive defense? He ranked out of 186 guys who qualified in that range. He was 170th out of 186. The best point of attack defenses in the NBA were Cleveland, Minnesota, Boston, Phoenix, and Oklahoma City. Okay. Big guy in the back, Jared Allen, Rudy Gobert, Kristaps Porzingis, length, great length on Boston. Phoenix, Nurkic is not, they play him drop solely, so he's just hovering in the middle. And then OKC, great length in Chet Holmgren. So I'm not sure we have the great length, but again, a lot of this stems back to Walker Kessler. Can Walker Kessler be impacting the game at a point in which Keyonte and the other guys can get up on a ball, defend, or play with more aggressiveness, and actually defend at the point of attack a little bit better than what we saw a year ago? Keyonte being a 1.04, 85th out of 100 as a rookie, like, yeah, that just does not bother me in the slightest bit. You just have to learn it eventually. The worst defensive players in the NBA, just to put in perspective kind of the numbers so you have it. Here's the best. So if Keyonte is kind of our 1.04 and Lauri's 1.11 and Collin's 0.966 points per drive and Jordan Clarkson's 1.18, or John Collins, excuse me, is 1.18. John Collins 1.18 and Clarkson is 0.97. Okay. So the best in the league was Peyton Watson in Denver at 0.87, Franz Wagner at 0.88, Tyrese Maxey 0.89, Jalen Green 0.90. The worst in the league was Cade Cunningham. This obviously depends where you filter, but this is taking about 100, 150 guys defending. Cade Cunningham was the worst in the league at 1.17. So John Collins, if he qualified, was on the wrong side of that at 1.18. And Lowry's getting to be in this ballpark, as we talked about. Interesting, DeJounte Murray is at 1.15, and CJ McCollum is at 1.14. That is now a starting backcourt. So we'll see whether or not suddenly New Orleans has a hard time against drives this year with that starting backcourt. And Jaime Jaquez in Miami as a rookie was a 1.13. Okay, well, Jaime Jaquez is thought of as a good defensive player who is a rookie, who is also the fourth worst defending the drive in the NBA, which means that, like, the fact that Keontae's at 1.04 bothers me zero. But it gives you perspective that, like, our best guy was Jordan Clarkson, 0.97, and Collin Sexton, 0.97. They're 0.01 off of, or 0.1 off of the best in the league. It's a decent amount. They're probably right around average. So Keontae's got to see if he can get himself to average. Lauri and John Collins really not good against drives. Lauri at 1.11, and then John Collins at 1.18, where Cade Cunningham's at 1.17 is the worst in the league. They'll qualify. And Bryce Sensabaugh in limited time worse than both those. So those are the two. The third one is rebounding, and we're going to talk about rebounding another day because it's actually really an interesting concept, and Bryce Sensabaugh may earn himself some time with the way he's playing with that. The point here is that number one is protecting the rim. Everything they're going to do now in the half court is going to be, when they're into a system, is to funnel into Walker and to protect and deny the rim. Point two is, can Walker's presence allow the defense to be more aggressive and better at point of the attack? And allow these guys to become better on-ball defenders. Will Hardy's point is you can talk about scheme all you want, but the minute you get into rotation, you're in trouble in the NBA. And so can the Jazz get better defensively? And, let me make sure we understand what get better defensively is. The first thing is the Jazz last year were last in the league defensively, but largely they were last in the league defensively because they allowed so much transition. So when you got into the half court, the Jazz were about 27th in the league, and I think in the half court defense. Not great. I think 1.04 points, and the best was 0.95. So that's a big margin, right? That's 0.1 on every single play for 70 plays. It gets to be 7 points a night in the half court. You're allowing more than the best teams in the league. It's an awful lot. But the concept here is, can we begin to get incrementally better so that when we're ready to be good, the foundation has been built? It's not that we're expected to be 15th best defense in the league, but if we can get to 20th and then get to 18th and then get to 12th, that's where we're heading. That's the goal. The fabulous Thurl Bailey continues and joins us as we continue next here on Locked On Jazz. How lucky are we get another day with Thurl Bailey. We wrapped up yesterday's conversation talking about the players who were having the most important year. We did not mention Keyonte George in that. I have a theory on rookies. If they have a good first year, they don't usually have a good second year, because actually what they do is they go home and they work on all the things they weren't good at. And then they come back and they're still not good at them because the NBA is really, really hard. This is kind of what I think happened to Walker. And then they go back in between the second and third year, and they go work on all the things they're really good at, and they get way better at those things. And that's how they figure out how they're going to make a living in the NBA, is those things. It's not going to be everything. You probably have a better perspective on that, having gone through that. But I feel like this could be that year for Keyonte where he's still trying to do everything and has to come back and realize, oh, wait, my strengths are off the bounce three. My strengths is getting the foul line. My strengths is my size defensively. It's not everything. What's your thought on what you're looking for from Key this year?
Well, again, point guard position, right? Leadership position. And, every player has their own growth rate, personality, the way they approach a game, their attitude. And I think Keyonte he's poised to have a really good NBA career. I think one of the things that helped him was, again, I call it you give a guy, you got to give him some rope to make mistakes, right? You got to give him, a chance to fail at some things to understand what he has to get better at. And I think Keyonte was really good at learning, especially offensively, learning at how to capitalize on those first actions off the pick and roll, like you talked about, off the dribble. How to get into the offense quicker and recognize what he had and what he didn't have, take care of his teammates. I think the part, hopefully, and sometimes, it's hard to work on some of this. It's more desire, but the defensive side, right? What happens when you make a mistake? I thought Keyonte had this gait. He had a GAIT about him. If something didn't go right, he didn't forget about it and get back and try to reconcile it quick enough, right? He kind of relied on his teammates to do that. And I think part of that just comes with constantly staying on them as a coach and saying, hey, you can't worry about that. They're not going to call a foul, especially last year. You're a rookie, right? I mean, now you got to really prove yourself that you belong. So I thought he did some things last season that were really impressive as far as seeing his growth from summer league to the end of the season. Got tired, but that was on purpose. They threw him out there on purpose and say, okay, you want it, you got to go get it, prove you deserve it. And I think, honestly, they're looking at him as they're building this franchise to say, can he lead us? Can he get us to where we want to go?
I mean, they talked so much last year about his love for the basketball game, his acumen, his desire. So hopefully we'll see that. The one that narrowed down for me is his shot spots got much narrower. Like early in the year, it was like
Jackson Pollock painting where you just threw paint on the wall and then he started to narrow in. I always think that's the sign someone's figuring it out. All right, Jazz re-signed Lauri. He's going to be the cornerstone here for a while. You have a great understanding, I think, of his game from size and versatility. You're probably one of the most similar players to how he plays and ever played in the NBA, and maybe the most similar kind of from the way you played to since you've played. What do you see as what he does? What are his next steps?
Well, I think there's a couple. I think the basketball one is I really would like to see him be a better ISO guy. You know, a guy who you can say, okay, I'm giving you the ball, go make the play. And it doesn't have to be for him all the time, but it should be. I don't know that over 3 dribbles, he's that effective after that if he's not at the rim or he's not into his shot. So I'm hoping like he's the guy that you can, and I know they tried a lot of this. He's the guy you can throw the ball to him at the nail, and then he can just, with his instincts, decide what he's going to do, either attacking the basket or shooting over people or pulling off the dribble. So I think Lauri is just, he's kind of an anomaly to me in a sense, just because of his length and the fact that he can shoot that high release, but also move without the basketball. And I think he's understanding how good he is now. I think it took him a minute when he came here. He had to be told that. We had that conversation about that. His teammates had to tell him, and his coaches had to tell him, look, we're following you, bro. So it may not be vocally what you say, although I like to see that come out more too. I think we've seen a little more of him being vocal and dissatisfied with calls and things like that to the refs. But I want to see a guy with that much talent not just use his talent to lead. And so that's the other thing, you know, the ISO thing, and then knowing that you're a leader, not being afraid to, you know, to have a combatant teammate, and then when you get off the court, everything's cool.
I did a show the other day about Lauri, and I mean, just how unique he truly is as a scorer. There's actually no one else that's really like him. If you look at the numbers, 84% of his field goals last year were assisted. There's not another guy who averages 20 points a game that's doing that. Even his 15-footers are assisted 80% of the time. His restricted area shots are assisted 71% of the time. I mean, there are only 4 players in the history of the game who have ever scored 20 points a game and had been assisted over 80%. They are Lauri Markkanen, Klay Thompson, Kristaps Porzingis, and I promise you'll never get the last one. In the last part of his career, Karl Malone.
Really?
So let's dig into that isolation concept, because he's Klay Thompson at this point. How does he become a little bit more Joel Embiid, a little bit more like, I'm going to get the ball and I go to work? Like, how hard is that of what we're asking him to do? How big a item is that?
No, I think it's in him, actually. I think if you're asking it of him, I think he's a kid that can find a way to do it. I think we saw some of that last year, kind of at the nail, right? Because when they know you're good, they're gunning for you. You're the target, right? You've got the target on your back. So is it totally necessary every game? No, I don't think so. But I think for him, it's got to be something he's comfortable with. And look, honestly, maybe he's not that guy, right? I think he can be. I think he has it in him. I think his confidence in his handling has to be there. But I don't want him focused on that so much that, you know, he doesn't see the other things that are around him, right? And I know that he's capable of doing it. So I'm hoping that that's a lot of what they've worked with him on this past season. If he had to work on one thing, I think that probably is it, because he's so good. He's such a freak of nature in a sense as to what he can do and how he can do it. And even if you have just that, I can live with it. I mean, I think the coaches can live with it. They
No,
just
right.
want him to get better at those things as well. So, but think about it though. At 7 feet tall, if you can add that little piece of confidence and say, I'm going to win you this game. And it doesn't necessarily have to have you coming off a screen or a special defense. It's an ISO play where you're better than that guy in front of you, and you're going to make the best play.
It's interesting. He's such a master at owning his space off a screen. He drives the guy into it. But he doesn't own his space when he catches. How oftentimes did we see that fade back, right? Like, how can he learn catch? I now am the aggressor. I own this space. This is mine. And then go to work.
Reps. That's all about reps. That's about getting in the gym with guys who are going to beat the crap out of you. And then, just constantly doing it until it becomes a part of you like anything else. And I think he's a quick study, right? I think it'll be interesting to see when the season starts. We know a lot of things that are going to be the same with him because that's what he's so valuable at, and you have to exploit those things. But again, the Jazz have some time, right? He's locked in, no pun intended. But I think that he's the guy you follow, and he's the guy that you win or lose with him.
He's Thurl Bailey. We'll have more with Thurl coming up. Will Hardy, year 3. What do we expect to see? Will be the first place we'll start. We'll talk some Western Conference stuff as well as we continue with the great Big T, Thurl Bailey. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the official ticketing app of Locked On and the answer for you when it comes to your last-minute ticket needs, whether it's a concert, whether it's a ball game, whether it's a baseball game, whatever it might be. Comedy, theater, Game Time has it for you, and they've got it with all the greatest deals. All-in pricing. If you toggle the feature, you get all the pricing up front, so turn that on. Seat view. Get the panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Lowest price guarantee. Game Time will give you 110% off the difference, and Game Time's ticket coverage covers you the most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets and do it with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. The great Thurl Bailey along with us. Catch him and Craig Bolerjack all year long. SEG Plus is available for you. You can go to UtahJazz.com. You can choose to get both the Jazz and the Utah Hockey Club this year on SEG Plus, or if you want just the Jazz, you can get the Jazz. It's $174 for the year, and you get both the Jazz and the hockey team. If you want the Jazz, it's $125, and you get the hockey team for just $50 extra. So pretty great deal for you there. Make sure you grab a hold of the SEG Plus streaming, get it on your phone, get it on your Roku, get it on wherever you want it. Available for you everywhere. It's SEG Plus. Year 3, Will Hardy. Similar, different? What do you expect?
Well, I mean, only way I can really, I guess, relate to that is my 3rd year in the league, right? I think even as a coach, there's more expectations that you have on yourself, right? And I know we've talked about patience and rebuilding this team. That he coaches with the team they give him. And so the one thing we do know, he wants to win, and his players want to win. So I'm very excited and interested to ask him that question and ask him his approach as a 3rd-year coach, right? With all the things that he's seen and gone through, and the expectations of fans, and the roster, all those things. So I love Will because he's a very personable and open guy, right? Especially with us, right? And I think that when you have a coach like that doesn't have any pretenses or anything to hide. He's going to tell you the truth about his players, about what he expects from them, and about, the expectations for the season. So, yeah, I think we're going to see a different Will in some ways, because I think after that first year, you're trying to think of, ways you could have been better, myself as a player, but I think coaches are similar in that. I'm excited to see the staff, again, that he's put together, some new parts to that, new responsibilities. But I also expect some things to not change, like his approach to the game, like in shoot-arounds when we get to go and watch them play, and him getting into guys and then, going up and coaching them up during the game. It's going to be a young team, obviously, again, so I think we're going to see quite a bit of that.
It's interesting. He's done such a masterful job of getting the best out of his players. I thought last year was really great in how poorly the team started. I don't know if that was his responsibility or not, but let's just say it was, because we're going to give him the credit for it on the other side, right? So let's just go both sides. They come out of training camp. The John Collins Walker doesn't seem to work. Walker gets hurt. The turnovers are crazy. We're in Portland. It's like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And then somehow he just gets this group to meld and form. And it's obviously going to be a harder job this year with as many as 7 young kids who want playing time at different points, 7 guys that are 3 years or less. But I just can't wait to see how he does it, because for 2 years in a row, he's done it.
Yeah. And we both know that he would take that responsibility on the other side as well. But that's a tough job, man. That's why you don't see me doing it, because that's, I just think that when you're a young coach like that and you have all these different personalities to deal with, and the one thing I will give Will credit for is his communication with his players. I can't remember in the last couple of years anything coming out of that locker room that should have stayed in there.
Oh, interesting.
Right. And there's always, I don't care how bad you are, how good you are as a player, there's always something. Right. And I don't think they ever had a player only meeting. Maybe they're not built that way. But I actually asked Will this. I said, well, if you had to have a player-only meeting, who would lead that meeting? And basically, I think he told me that he would have to be in there, right? And I think that's a sign of a coach who's working on finding that leadership from different people, finding guys who can step up in a moment's notice and not necessarily an introvert, because all of them want to win and they get along just great, but Will always talks about this hierarchy in the league, right? It's there. There's nothing you can do about it. So that's the one thing I'm looking to see if there's a difference, if he is demanding more of his players in that respect to be leaders and to be a little bit more vocal as far as what they want, because that's going to contribute to those W's and those L's as well.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because if you talk about the hierarchy salary, obviously Lauri's number 1 this year, and then John Collins is 2. We haven't talked about him. Collin Sexton, you talked about earlier, was 3, and Jordan Clarkson's 4. We haven't talked about him. So it's a really interesting in regards to that of the hierarchy, which is often dictated on your experience and your salary and how the league works. And yet the guys we're talking about most interested and want to know how it's going to happen. And you have Kessler, and you have Keyonte, and you have Bryce Sensabaugh, and you have, I'm going to forget, Taylor Hendricks, and you have Isaiah Collier and Kyle Filipowski and Cody Williams. And you can't play all 7 of those guys. You just can't. But really, Justin Zanuck and Danny Ainge really need to know about what those 7 guys are before they have 3 first-round draft picks in this next draft. So that is a tricky job for Will Hardy, year 3. It'll be fun to watch. All right, Western Conference. Just big picture. What jumps out to you the most from the offseason?
I'm not a huge fan of the way Luka Doncic plays, just from a player standpoint. But I think those guys are closer to an NBA championship now with Klay Thompson on that team. I got to respect the guy because he's the best at what he does. He is a problem every freaking single night. And so I think the Klay Thompson move to Dallas is probably the biggest for me because I'm not sure we'll ever get the Klay Thompson of old, but the way Dallas will use him, I think it will bring some new life into him and maybe give him that piece that they need to get back there.
It's interesting. I sat on the floor watching his and Steph's workout last year. It's a miracle to me that Klay Thompson's actually playing. Like his legs that leg doesn't work right. Like it doesn't bend right. It doesn't move right. It's not the same size as the other leg. Like the fact that he's still able to get off 7, 8 threes a game at 40% is mind-boggling to me after watching him work out on the floor.
Yeah, I've always been a fan. And you know, when he got hurt, it hurt a lot of people. I think even me as a basketball fan. And you've always been waiting to see if he could bring that. I think a guy like Kevin Durant was better after his injury. I think a guy like Paul George was better after his injury. And you were wondering if Klay Thompson was going to get back. And we saw signs of it, don't get me wrong. But I think some of that probably wasn't even on him. It was that team dynamic and all the things that were going on with that team. So he's one to watch. That team actually is definitely a team to watch.
Thurl Bailey, it's great chatting with you. I look forward to spending the season with you. You're the best. You make me smile every time I see you. I hope everybody smiled while they were listening today. And we will chat soon. New Zealand Breakers right around the corner.
Looking forward to it, D.
Thanks a lot. That's Thurl Bailey. If you're on audio, check out Locked On NBA. It's your daily NBA podcast. And if you're on video, here we'll send you to the first ever 24/7 national sports channel, Locked On Sports Today.